May 13th, we gave a look at the amended budget for this year.
Dr. King, do we start with public comment first?
I was just going to, a couple of
Okay.
real quick comments, and we'll have the comment. I just want to remind the board that that amended budget did close the deficit gap by about $1 million. A lot of that was due to health insurance, no increase in that cost. Certainly, as we move forward, we hope we can tighten it a little better through the audit process. But the next step is the hearing right now, and then a resolution later to approve the budget.
Okay. Any public comment on the budget? Mr. Knapp? Oh, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Just a minute. I'm sure it's in here. Matt, yes. May I have a motion and a second to move for the hearing on the budget, to open the hearing on the budget?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Fowler?
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson? Aye. Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mr. Patel? Aye. Mrs. Ross?
Aye.
Mr. Boyd?
Aye.
Mrs. Whitmore?
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Knapp?
Yes, I'd like to talk briefly, and we've talked about this over the last 10 or 15 years, about busing. I think busing costs is part of the budget, is that correct?
Yes.
The busing costs in this city has risen and risen and risen. The number of students being bused has risen. I was at a Quest meeting at Bradley where they talked about the busing and kids riding buses for 40 minutes one way to school. Since they've closed the schools on the north side, Woodruff in particular, all of those kids up from Woodruff to the Journal Star are being bused out of that neighborhood to other schools. 60% of all problems occur on buses. We are paying extra. The big thing that the public was told about busing was that the state of Illinois paid for 75% of the busing, therefore it was a good deal. Well, that's still taxpayer dollars. We in Peoria still pay those dollars. Now that gas is $4 a gallon and buses are so expensive that we've got to buy used buses because we can't buy new buses, it only makes sense to get a master plan to put on the table for 5 or 10 years out that says we're going to return to neighborhood schools. We've had people come to this podium and talk about neighborhood schools and busing and the problems of busing, and the fact that busing is no boon to students. It does them no good to sit on those buses. They're not safe to begin with. The kids aren't belted in. It's just a matter of time before you have more accidents and more kids get hurt. Please put that on your agenda to return to neighborhood schools. Thank you.
Would any other members of the public like to comment on the budget?
I'm still Savino Sierra. I still live on the south side. This is what I had said before about you people squandering the money. And that's a good example what Mr. Knapp has brought up. And you people better smarten up because you are really sending us down to the road of damnation. And I'm serious, you people aren't too smart. I hate to admit it, you are good people, but you're making bad decisions. And you better, like I say before, you better wake up before it's too late. And what's going to happen with your, what do you call it? Your reputation when you leave, it isn't going to be very good, Probably an F-. And I'm serious about you. You think we just stand up here blowing the hot air, If you'd only listen to some of your elders, like Mr. Knapp and myself too, I was born in 31, and I think probably they say experience is the best teacher, And the older you get, the more wiser you get. And I'm telling you people to wise up and don't be throwing our money away, making all kinds of excuses, like the book deal, you know what I mean? What good does it do to spend all that money? And let our teachers teach. Don't be messing with them. And I'm glad that you finally showed respect to our security forces and you signed a contract with them. But $500, you know, is nothing compared to the thousands that we've given the superintendent and the treasurer, you know. That's unjust, you know. So you people better turn Christian again and do some good deeds for a change. Thank you.
Any other public comment on the budget? Okay, we will end the public comment on the budget. Any comments, questions for Dr. Kinney on the budget? Mr. Cloyd?
Just if you could recap the total spending dollars, please, and the forecast revenue.
On the operational side, we're looking at just under $170,000 in expenses, right about $169,000, and, I'm sorry, million. And in revenues, 166, a little over 166.25 million. That's the operational side. Obviously, that's the biggest part of the budget. For the total budget, again, we're looking at a deficit of right about $3 million with total direct revenues, not including debt service or capital projects, of about $173 million versus $176 million in expenditures.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Kinney? I need a motion and a second to adjourn the budget hearing.
So moved.
Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mrs. Costa? Aye. Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Ms. Patel? Aye. Mrs. Ross? Mr. Cloyd?
Aye.
Mrs. Oakmeyer?
Aye.
Okay, we're back on to the meeting, and as explained at the outset, we're going to move now to the Peoria Stadium presentation, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Kinney. That is under remarkable rule number 3, respect our finances.
And then we will return to public.
And we will return to public comment after that, so if your name has not been called, you will be called. Yeah.
Okay, what I'd like to do a little bit tonight is just take a few minutes here to talk about why this is a timely, and maybe decision is the wrong word. No decisions will be made tonight, but certainly discussion, consideration. I want to talk a little bit about the Mr. Elias proposal so that people can see what his suggestions were, and that's all they are, suggestions. And, maybe some other information that's been presented in the paper, maybe I can put some clarity to some of those numbers that have been given, and certainly talk a little bit about the overriding theme for District 150. And certainly that overriding theme for District 150 has to center around what this board and administration think about that's best for kids. So, obviously, one of the things that we do think about is, can we maintain the stadium for the long run? And maybe it's more than just can we, it's maybe should we? Or should we look at look at the possible value of this if we were to sell the property off? One of the things that we are looking at, and I did appreciate Pam Adams' article, apparently 40-plus years ago, there were considerations about looking at the stadium then, and they spent a little bit of money. Well, it needs it again. We've put together some information. I didn't spend a lot of time. We did not do true bid specs and go out and get actual bids, but we did have professionals look at different parts of the stadium and look to see what suggested costs might be in looking at repairing it. Certainly one of the costs right up front is about $60,000 in utilities and some of the mowing and things like that. All right, about the stadium. Field needs new sod. There are crown and draining problems. It's pretty hard to line that field. All fixable. It does not have a sprinkler system, and it probably should. In this day and age, most football fields do. Track service is very, very poor. In fact, we've abandoned the track this spring. We did not use it at all. That track has 36-inch lanes. Standard for high schools is 42. I'm not sure that's a good situation, so that certainly impacts cost as we go forward. All of these things, I don't need to go through all of them, but certainly the next slide will address some of these as you see it. Some of the costs that we are looking at. The print will be a little small for the audience, so bear with me. I'll try to talk through some of them. What we did when we looked at some of these different costs, there certainly is a low end and a high end, and I'll explain it on the very first item, repair or replace the track. I'm guessing that what we had at one point was a 6-lane track that somebody decided to make into an 8-lane track, and rather than widen it, they just made the lanes 36 inches. They altered hurdles and so forth. Not a good idea, but the surface is bad pretty much all the way around. Each of the last couple of years, we've put between $10,000 and $20,000 to try to patch little areas so we could continue to use it. But it needs a total resurfacing. When you resurface a track, you're going to pull up the old rubber surface that's on the top, and below that is like a blacktop road almost. And if there are bad spots in that, those will have to be addressed. But if we were going to just pretty much limit to resurfacing the current track, it's at that $150,000 range. If we're going to do a higher end where we would want to pull out the current blacktop, widen it to a true 8-lane track, and then resurface it, it's going to end up at about that kind of a price. The wiring, if you look up into the rafters, you'll see exposed junction boxes. In fact, there are some places where wires have been cut and still hanging. There's actually some old knob and tube wiring. Now, I hope it's not active, but it certainly needs to be addressed and that wiring updated. There is railing that's sunk into the concrete that has rusted at the base to the point where the railing is loose. If there was ever a massive exodus of people, I would worry that would create a problem. There are no handrails within the bleacher areas. Do they need to be there? No, but when you're going up 30 rows, there would be some comfort in having some of those rails available. Not a big cost item. One of the biggest costs is the concrete. It's in very poor shape, especially on the visitor's side. Very poor shape. If you sit in the stadium, the sound is not good, so we'd like to address that. Again, not a big cost item, but it needs to be done. Had our paint crew go out and look, and they would think it would take between 4 to 6 weeks for our crew of 4 to paint the inside of that stadium area. The roof needs to be replaced. We'd like to resod and recrown the field and install sprinkling. You can see the range of $125,000 to $175,000. It would depend on exactly how we do it. Press box is not ADA accessible. If we were going to do something with the stadium, that does need to be corrected, and when that is corrected, we need to widen the path that goes from the back of the stadium up to the press box area. So an elevator would certainly solve a lot of that. Repair the parking lot, replace the scoreboard, you can see those prices. So that just gives us a flavor for what it would cost, and I imagine that along with that, as we look at it, is it worth it? So let's talk a little bit about the attendance there.
Can you go back and give those overall totals?
Yeah, at the low end, I think we'd need to look at $1,156,000, basically to a range of about $2.3 million.
And just to clarify, when you talk about the elevator and walkway to press box area, if we start doing any substantial work on the building, we have to bring it up to ADA
There are
code?
some things we'd have to address, and I should point that out, and thanks for that. Certain things are grandfathered in, but if you were going to build a 7,000-seat stadium, it would be massively different than what this one is. For example, if you're going to seat 7,000 people, there's not near enough restrooms. We would have to look at, if we were going to try to renovate and put it to full use, we'd have to look at, some significant restroom areas on the visitor side, and that's not on here. So, okay, all right. This past year, average attendance was less than 1,000 at our football games. And so certainly our consideration here is, do we justify this with this kind of shrinking attendance? There are relatively few other events. I might add, people know the tradition. There were 4 high schools, 2 Catholic schools, and Bradley University playing there many years ago. And literally what we are down to now, once Notre Dame moves out, would be 2 high schools, Peoria, Central, and then Manual. Those would be the only ones left. Notre Dame is working on their football field. We understand it should be ready in the fall of 2014. So they would go away as a user of the stadium. Now, certainly, if we still host games there, they would come as visitors, but they would not be the hosts. And so the number of games literally would go down to probably 9, 8, 9, maybe 10 in a given year, but you would think with decent scheduling, we'd have 9 home games a year for the 2 high schools. Okay, 2012, one of our high schools averaged 567 in paid attendance. Now, certainly, some students get in free, cheerleaders, band, football players, and there are other people on pass gates. Averaged $2,223 per game. That same school averaged about $2,500 the previous year. The other high school averaged $460 in paid attendance this year, and last year about $740. So you can look at all of that, add up the revenue, and the revenue just is not much to help pay for the costs of what we're trying to do there, and to justify maybe future use of the stadium from District 150. I think one of the things that we do need to note, obviously this is District 150 using the stadium. The Park District does use the 4 softball fields, and certainly we'll talk about those more in a minute, but we do need to remember that those are primarily adult softball fields and adult usage. Our students do not use those fields other than some middle school stuff, and I can explain more on them in a bit. We'll talk a little bit about our financial picture because it is an important picture to look at. We do have 14,000 students. We've been relatively stable in our enrollment for a couple of years. We actually grew slightly. We do know that state and federal revenue sources are both at best unpredictable and precarious. And I'll give you a little bit more information. Local real estate taxes provide about 39% of our revenue. EAV is down and expected to go down again. When we talk about state financial resources, just in general state aid alone, if what happens next year that we think will happen with the governor's proposal for 82% funding, we're looking at pretty close to a $17 million loss in state aid in 3 years running total. So property taxes have gone down, property values have gone down. So certainly, as we look at our projected revenues, it's not a real pretty picture. Federal.
And just to clarify that, the state allocates a certain amount of money to us in general state aid, and then they only pay us 82% of it.
Right.
And so we started a deficit right off the bat.
Mr. Knapp made a comment in the budget about transportation, 75% funding. I just wish that were true. We are landlocked in District 150. Most of the development of commercial property is outside of District 150. It's in the city of Peoria, but is not inside District 150. Let me go back one more time. When we look at these issues with revenue sources, certainly you as a board have taken some other steps to look at creative ways to get other revenues, and certainly this is among the creative ideas. We did last Tuesday night attend a city council meeting. We are very concerned about future revenues in our property taxes and how TIFs affect them. And the city is very willing, they were receptive to talk about how there can be some made up back to the school district when they take those TIF monies and set up new TIF districts. They're looking at setting up their 13th one, I believe, so it's a lot of TIFs in this area, and a lot of the commercial properties are in those TIFs downtown. We also have taken a step as a board, you have as a board, to suggest that we take to the voters next March a county facility sales tax. Nobody wants more taxes, but somewhere here, we've got to find other sources of revenues for our facilities. And so I just think it's important to remind people that we are working very hard to look for other sources of revenues that don't necessarily hit the property owners. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the taxes. It's a little hard to see there, but the three that we just talked about, property taxes at 39%, state aid at about 25%, federal sources at 17%, that's 81% of our revenues. I just think it's important to note. Just a quick slide on the EAVs. One of the things, and I said this a couple years ago, before it started going down, there were two things you could count on in your revenue sources. One was fairly steady property taxes, and the other was fully funded state aid. And obviously, the last couple of years, that story has changed, and that's caused us a lot of anguish in trying to figure out how we're going to raise revenues. It is important to note that as the EAV does go down, we have been told to expect one more year of it going down. That's not good for us, and then probably the next year it'll level out. So we will see how that turns out going forward. But I just wanted people to see a picture of the revenues.
Excuse me, can you explain what EAV is?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. EAV is equalized assessed value. When a home is determined to be $120,000 value, the EAV is 1/3 of that, or the EAV, when you look at your property taxes, if that was your house, the EAV would be $40,000. And so it's that $40,000 divided by 100 times the tax rate. That's how tax bills are figured.
So that's
Okay.
essentially what the tax base we're taxing for the city of Peoria. The EAV is how we track our tax base.
And certainly, well, we'll get to that in a minute. This is a slide that just kind of shows, it's hard to see, but there's a green line that's solid and there's a red line that's dotted. In 2008, we were very close, but I do need to point out that the only reason revenues and expenditures matched that year is we put, and this is our operational expenses, which includes the education fund, the transportation fund, operations maintenance, and then our IMRF fund. The reason it matched that year was $4 million extra dollars were put into the O&M fund for our revenue. Otherwise, there would be a deficit there. But what we have tried to do in the last couple of years is get our revenues, our expenses down below our revenues, and we have been moderately successful. I'd like to say it's going to continue, but as we hear about, as I've already said, lack of appropriation of the general state aid fund, property values going down, federal sources going down, and add to that concerns about pension funding being shoved down on us, you can imagine that $7 or $8 million in pension funding, if it is shoved our way, which seems to be the plan in a number of years, that's going to hurt our revenue sources and our expenditures even more. All right, obviously, it's no secret. I should say I put this presentation together a while back, and we've held off giving it because we've been asked to, so I won't go much more into that. But obviously, a major retail anchor is interested. What we would look at is the potential of working with the city if we were going to do this. The city would contract to sell to any developers, anchors, et cetera. We would like to work together with them, and I will tell you that our plans all along, our discussions have never included Ricketts on Lake Street nor the Stadium Park on Lake Street. That has not been something we've considered. Let me just show you, it's a little hard to see, but you can see two dotted lines horizontally across the graphic of the stadium property. I do need to point out that there's about 82 acres, and some people just do not know the school district owns all of that. Okay, the park district leases a portion of it, and it is a $0 lease. There is no revenue for the district for that. One of the things that was talked about by Mr. Elias is moving the 4 ball fields around above that first bottom red line that you see. Whether or not they'll fit, don't know, but Stadium Park is up at the top. So we wanted people to be able to see that. This might show it a little better. You can see the white spaces, which is the 4 ball fields, the pathway to the stadium park that's up at the very top. That's what the IDNR grant is all about. That way people have an idea of what's controlled by the IDNR grant, and maybe it's a little easier to see the potential of those ball fields possibly being moved up. Now, I want to back up just one more for a minute here. Let me explain something that has been in the paper. When we talk about the district cannot sell directly to Walmart, that is the case mostly. Let's go back and talk about, we have sold off a couple of closed schools. When we've done that, we've been able to find somebody interested in the facility. We talk about, okay, what's the price going to be? But we auction the schools off. We put 3 notices in the paper so that people have an idea that we are selling it. Well, and we even go back further than that. The board does publicly declare the property as excess. And then we go into this idea of if there's a potential buyer, what do they want to offer for it and so forth. So, and I'll give Greeley as an example. The board had determined that if we were going to sell Greeley, we needed to get at least $150,000 out of it. Well, we did not have a buyer for that at that price. We have had some people tell us less. We have maybe somebody that's interested in coming back, but we have that ability to auction the property. That's the only way we could sell it. Why are we doing it with closed schools? Well, it makes sense, and we've told anybody that is interested, please feel free. We try to allow enough time in the auction process. Please feel free to check with the city for potential zoning issues that they might have. But generally, somebody that's going to buy a closed school is going to be like a church or a not-for-profit agency that isn't going to be worried about zoning changes. They're really going to be more worried about special use permits within the zoning that's allowed. And we also, between an auction time and an actual closing on the property, have allowed 3 months for people to work those issues out with the city. And in every case, they've been able to do that. But let's go then to the next way we've sold property. We did sell directly to the county. They acted as a conduit for both Columbia and Laux in order to sell it to Quest. We couldn't sell directly to Quest, at least at that point in time. But we were able, what we can do is we can either auction the property or we can sell it to another government agency. And so, in this case, we feel like this would be far too complicated for us to try to handle in any kind of an auction process. We believe that we do need to work with the city because of the significant zoning involved. Okay? Let me back up one more time. Mr. Elias has suggested in his letter, and that was in the paper, information about it, could the 4 ball fields be maybe moved up into that darker area that's excluded and maybe that white pathway? I think if we were to look at that, the park could be undisturbed up at the top, but it would probably need to be in a cloverleaf style. So people ask, so what's cloverleaf? So here's a picture. This is a Google Earth view of Eastside Center. And just a couple of quick comments about it. When you see the 4 together like that, that's a cloverleaf style of a layout for ball fields. It's a little more efficient. When you look at what we have right now, that's not a real efficient layout of those ball fields, and everybody knows that, but it's because it's longer and skinnier. So, one other thing I'd like to point out, the ball fields that are at the stadium property right now are designed for adult softball. They are essentially 275 feet from home base to the center field fence. There's about 25 feet behind the plate to get to the backstop. Those fields would be more along the size of what you see down at the bottom right, that cloverleaf. If you look at that cloverleaf that's right about the middle of the screen, those are truly baseball fields, the 2 on the right side of that cloverleaf. Those are bigger fields. And why I'm mentioning that is somebody said once, well, why aren't you guys using those ball fields? Well, they're really not designed for us. They're too small for high school baseball, and they're too big for high school softball by quite a bit. they're very different size fields. So, but that's what's currently there, and I just wanted people to see what a cloverleaf looks like. All right. Benefits to us if we were to consider the sale, obviously, it would expand our commercial real estate tax base and would increase the district EAV. It would provide a long-term revenue stream if it's sold commercially to whomever. Obviously, we've talked about collaboration with the city. And what would we do? Well, we would look at the sale price, funds that it might generate, and go back and look at our 2 high schools that would be participating then at their home fields, and then take some of those funds to also address some of our middle school athletics. Our middle school athletics are programs that are just not very good, and if we're going to be competitive, they need to improve. Okay, and I mentioned the idea of a commercial sale. This is just a screen that I've made up. This is not from anything, but I just kind of want to make a point that there are 2 parts to a potential sale that are important to us. Obviously, you can look at the top, the initial sales price of the property, and then also what's the ongoing potential revenue for it. And I think that's an important number we've got to look at. When we look at the combination of the 2, if we were going to do some kind of an RFP for development that would go nationwide, I think that's important to us. A mega church buying it isn't going to provide that long-term revenue source that a commercial development would. So I think that's just important to keep in mind. Yeah.
I just want to clarify, that was just an example. There is no RFP put together.
No, there is no RFP.
We started that process, we are not that far along.
We're not at all. I just made this up just to make a point, so, sure. There is no RFP out there. Maybe people think there should be, I don't know. I've already mentioned that it's a 0 lease. Obviously, we need to talk to the Park District about the possibility of relocating those fields. I think that's been well described in the newspapers, that it is something that's going to have to be considered if we're going to proceed with this. And obviously, the Park District would get some benefits as well. They would increase their revenues. Now, one of the things I said I want to do is clarify some of the things that people have seen in the newspaper. One of the things in the discussions with the Park District, they said that if they were going to move, they would need something along the lines of $5.5 million to move. Keeping in mind it's our land in the first place, but this is their proposal. They're suggesting that they would need to have a 5-field cloverleaf, parking for 210 cars, all the site preparation that goes with it. They would like $510,000 to buy land. They would like to have about $1.5 million to build the softball fields, a lot of grading, architectural fees, a $557,000 restroom concession building. Most of this doesn't exist now. $330,000 basically for bleachers, ADA paths, and signage. So when you take contingency and architectural fees, basically this is what they're talking about. When I got this, I did ask, actually I'd asked for this first, but I wanted to know what did they spend on those fields 3 years ago. And they spent about $1,060,000. And the reason I brought this up here is I want to show that you see that second number down, park improvements, $400,392. If you take that off of that total, it would appear that they spent about $660,000 or so on those fields. Now, that's including a $115,000 design and engineering fee, which is a little on the high side, but that's okay, $660,000. So I did reply to the Park District that maybe the discussion should center on something other than that. Again, I looked at the total price of what they spent to renovate, take away the stadium park improvements, the difference there, throw in the land that they've asked for 2 slides ago here, second item down, $510,000. So maybe that's where our discussion should center. Now, that's prior to Mr. Elias's proposal. Certainly, we can talk about that as well. That would be a whole lot less costly than either of these. So, Obviously, there are some questions that we will need to talk about. How do we go about football? We have discussed this a little bit with the ADs. Certainly, currently, Manual, and I mentioned before, Manual and their attendance at stadium, their second biggest crowd this past year was actually at Manual High School for a JV game. So people are willing to go there. Peoria High has its own freshman and sophomore games on their fields as well. So it is documented that people will attend games there. But we'd like to enhance those facilities. Manual's got a nice track, and we gave them some equipment this year, and they hosted their own meets. They've got a very nice all-weather 6-lane track. Sure, it'd be nice to be bigger than that, but that's what they need. And they've got a very, very good field. They've probably got one of the best fields. Richwoods does have a full stadium. They also have 2 practice fields. And clearly, we could write a schedule where everybody played at Richwoods. Now, that's not what we want. One of the messages that we've had clearly from our staffs at the schools is that they would like to do things at their own property. They want a place that they can call their house. If you've been to some high school games, that's a pretty big cheer when you have a dominant team. But they'd like to have their house and their home and go out and use their facilities. Kids would like to have their friends come to games, and when we're going all over doing some of the things we're doing, it hurts that image. So, again, we need to figure out exactly what it would cost, and certainly one of the questions that you will be facing is, if we don't sell the property, but we think we need to spend $2 million, would we rather spend the $2 million elsewhere? And certainly that's a question to ask. What would it take to move the Park District ball diamonds? We just showed you that. When would site development? Well, that's an impossible question to answer because we're nowhere near any kind of decision. In fact, I hope, I'm about to end, I hope people aren't disappointed because I haven't talked much about Walmart. That's because we haven't talked much about Walmart. Walmart has expressed interest, but we have not met with them. I don't know if the city has. If we want to talk about their design development, I couldn't tell you anything because I have not seen anything. What I think is important is the bottom line there, neighborhood concerns. Obviously, they are there. We hear you. I think that one of the next steps is that we join with the city and certainly listen to what some of those proposals would be and see whoever would be a developer or a retail anchor, how they would address these neighborhood concerns. So I think that certainly is one of our next steps, is to get those kinds of meetings going too. Any questions?
Are we going to comment now?
Well, I did say that we go back to public comment. We have about, let's close it out. I guess that's part of the presentation. Any questions, comments, Dr. Kinney?
I have comments.
Go ahead.
Okay. To me, and as people have called me this week, this is what I've had to say, it's a 2-part problem. Should the district maintain the stadium, which is within our control as a school board? And the second part is, if not, what should go there, which is a community issue that the community needs to decide. I think Dr. Kinney's presented some really good information that upkeeping, renovating, maintaining that stadium is a financial drain on the district and possibly not justified any longer. What should go there is a different question that the school district doesn't have a lot of control over. I personally, just as an individual, would rather see a park there. My kids and I are at the stadium park every week, in the sand park, as they call it. Most of the sand is in my minivan. I love it there. I do not want a big box there. I particularly do not want a Walmart there. I have not shopped at Walmart in my adult life because I have problems with how they do business, and I do not want to. I'm not saying that to get applause. I'm saying this because I'm going to tell you what I think. I am also concerned, as someone mentioned, it would simply shift the taxes from the university Walmart and nothing would go in there, and I have real concerns about that commercial strip with all the check into cash and the pawn broker and everything else that's there, the viability of that commercial strip. I think it would just shift money, not add money. But The school district doesn't run parks, and if we want to have a park there, then we need to work with the park district, we need to work with the city, we need to work with the community to make a park happen, and it cannot be the school district's business to run, build, or maintain a park. We are having trouble affording, educating our students, we can't run a park. So I'm going to tell you what you guys need to do if you want a park. I'm concerned that with this $5.5 million proposal that the Park District wants us to buy out, they're not real serious about working with us on it. I'm concerned the city is only interested in commercial development there. And I think that for my fellow board members, it's going to be real tough to look at a revenue stream in terms of property taxes and not take that revenue stream. Our only source of local tax revenue is property tax. We are landlocked to prevent expansion. That's been the case for a very long time now. A lot of new development goes into the Dunlap School District. That's a real problem for us. The city gets bigger, the school district doesn't. So much of our downtown is property tax exempt between OSF, Methodist, Bradley, the Catholic diocese. If you drive down Main Street, down the hill, you look at all those undeveloped, single-story, flat parking lots, that is all nonprofit-owned land that is generating no income, and we are getting no income from that. You look at parking lots that are owned by corporate entities, those are 10 stories tall downtown. If they're flat, it's because they don't have to pay for that land, so they don't have to put anything there, they don't have to use it, we get no benefit. There are 12 TIFs in this city, again, tax money that's being taken away from the schools. So any development that you are going to convince my fellow board members to adopt is going to have to address this issue of the property tax revenue stream that the district could get by selling this to a corporate developer. We are starved for cash, we are being starved for cash, and it's not just because of one issue, but it's all these issues that we are so limited in how we can raise money. We are landlocked, half of downtown is tax exempt, there are 12 TIFs. We are being starved for the dollars to educate our children, and then we are told by other community entities that we need to do more with the schools to bring people into Peoria, and that is true, but there's only so much we can do when all of these tax dollars are going to other entities, they're going into TIFs, they're going up to Dunlap. So when my fellow board members look at a chance to get these property taxes, if you want to convince them and convince the city that this should be a park, you're going to need a proposal that addresses that property tax issue, because that is a big dollar value, looking at property taxes coming in from a commercial development there on War Memorial Drive. That is very hard to turn down. That is the direction you're going to need to go if you want that to be addressed. I would like to see a park there. I do not want my kids playing at the sand park, which is our favorite park, with, big stinky trucks pulled right up behind there delivering things. That is not what I want. That is not what I want in the center of Peoria. I would like a park there. But I'm also responsible for all of these tax dollars, and that we cannot run a park with school tax dollars. So I would love for the community to get together and turn this into a park, but it needs to be a community effort with the appropriate bodies, and specifically with the Park District. That is what I have to say.
Any other questions?
Anyone else have? Okay. Well, a couple of comments. One of them is building new stadiums. We're not talking about building new stadiums. We're talking about providing the potential for suitable outdoor athletic facilities at two schools that really don't have the suitable athletic facilities that they should have. So if you take a look at high school athletic facilities, there are no stadiums being built anymore unless they're in Texas, where they spend more on their stadiums than we spend on Capitol for the next 25 years. We have a few options. One of them is to do nothing. Another is to try and find a buyer for this property in a manner that meets with the law. Another is to repair and maintain it, or to find some other creative solution to it. I think it's really important. I appreciate Dr. Kinney's presentation, because we have been in a fact deficit here for some time, and it's one thing to feel and be concerned about your neighborhood. It's another thing to say, well, don't put it there and don't do that. But at the same time, we have a different responsibility to the entire population of students. 14,000 students in this district. 12% of the population of the city of Peoria is in our schools every school day. And if we don't provide the resources and the facilities and the things that keep them in school and attract them to our schools, our issues just become more difficult. So I understand why people are unhappy about this, but I also understand that we have a set of responsibilities here that we're trying to discharge properly. But at the same time, the state legislature is starving the schools in the state for revenue. The TIF districts that the city has blanketed the downtown with and is going to add more, deprive us of any growth in revenue from economic improvement for 23-plus years, and some of them have been extended. And we've talked about a sales tax. Well, nobody wants a sales tax. I don't think anybody, if I said, who wants to see their property taxes go up, there's not going to be a hand go up there. What are we going to do? What's the solution here? So I hear what people are saying. I haven't made my mind up on this at all, frankly. But we need to have some facts, and we need to have some discussion, and that's what we're trying to get done here. Thank you.
Well, I think Ms. Patel sort of put our position out there very well, and I thank you for doing that. I think you can see from the presentation, there are a whole lot of questions that still have to be answered, not only for you, but for us, for me personally. And I want to thank everybody who came tonight, and who has already spoken and is going to speak tonight, because you've already given me some more questions that I need answers to, that I had not thought about. And I also have not made up my mind about this, but the bottom line is, like my other board members have said, unfortunately for us, this becomes a financial issue, and I wish it didn't. I wish we had enough money that we could put the park there, because that's the ideal use of that land. But we also have to look at whatever possible income we can find at this point, and we certainly want to work with the other entities in the area to do that. And I understand your concerns. I totally understand your concerns, and we are listening to your concerns. And like I said, it was obvious from the presentation, there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, whether it's with the city, with the developer, and you have already raised some that I had not thought of, that I will certainly be looking for confirmation on before we go anywhere with this. So as far as I'm concerned, at this point, it's still an information gathering thing. We don't even know it's going to be viable to move forward and look at it. But I think we are obligated as elected officials for this school district and the children in this district to look at every option that comes before us. That doesn't mean we're going to go with that option, but it certainly means we have to consider everything that comes forward. So I encourage you to continue to contact us by phone, by email, coming to the meetings. As you come up with ideas or you come up with more concerns, I certainly want to hear those, because I certainly can't think of everything every possibility out there. So I welcome, and I think all my board members do, fellow board members do, welcome your input, your concerns, and your questions. I just don't want you to think that just because we don't agree with you right away, we aren't listening, because that's not true. There's a difference between being disagreed with and not being heard. So it's not that you're not being heard. We are going to listen. And this is not something that's going to come up for a vote or anything in the real near future. There's just way, way too many questions out there and lack of information. So I do appreciate the show of support tonight, because I know you are concerned, and I appreciate that, and so I want to thank you for that. And please be sure to keep in touch with us.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfmeyer. Any other questions, comments? Any other questions or comments? I would second Ms. Wolfmeyer's comments. Thank you all for coming. This is the first of what I anticipate to be many conversations on this issue. Continue to contact us. We like, the more people at the board meetings, the merrier, because many of you have, maybe this is your first time to a school board meeting, and we need to hear from you. The intention of this board was never, ever to have this somehow done in secret, as has been accused of us.
Thank you.
I'd encourage you to come get the information from the horse's mouth, so to speak, because I've heard a lot of rumors about this particular property that simply are not true. Every single person who sits up here does it out of their own time They are volunteers, they are members of the community like you, and they also have a historical perspective of what property we are talking about. Don't underestimate for a moment how much of a connection we have to these various properties and understanding what is at stake here. That's all I'll say. So I appreciate your respectful inquiries, and frankly, for the most of you, and what I've received thus far, it's been that way, and I think that is the best way going forward. That's the way I'm going to try to be towards you, because I know that no matter what is decided, it's not easy. All right. Dr. Latham.
And also just to add that the board is in constant communication as it relates to this stadium issue. It is not just myself and the other two CEOs or presidents of the other two entities talking, that the board, every step of the way, has been a part of these discussions. I think that was also portrayed, that it was just maybe three of us together talking, but that you have been fully aware, and actually you've given us directives as a staff on what Dr. Kinney and I needed to do along with other staff members to gather research. So I just
Right.
want that to be pointed out also, please.
Thank you, Dr. Latham. Why don't we move back to audience comment? And for audience comment, I would just also add, for those of you who are new to school board meetings, we've probably given you a lot of information. It's not a question and answer format. I'm hoping that we can do that down the road, and I think we need to discuss that as a board about where we're going to go out in the public and have some question and answer sessions as this issue develops, but this is not the appropriate forum for that. So if we're not answering your questions, I don't apologize, because I just told you not to ask them, so.
Just have Dr. Kinney get back to us
You know what,
with
and
the
the best, actually, you are able to ask them, it's just you won't get an immediate response until the audience presentation portion of the meeting has concluded. Thank you. All right, moving on. Jerry Mattson.
high school students. There's a grading committee that's reviewing the attendance policy and also our grading structure. The evaluation tool that was implemented last school year for every teacher in the district was a joint effort with members of the teachers union and also administration, and that committee meets and makes recommendations for changes as we move forward. All school board members did receive a copy of the article by the American Federation of Teachers. Ms. Costick participated in that session about 2 weeks ago as it related to Peoria High and also Woodruff. And it relates to the PBIS discipline survey. I think we've talked about that individually with board members and looked at that. We do know what schools need to address issues as it relates to PBIS, and that will be done on an individual basis, not as a public discussion as it relates to implementing that policy. Thank you.
I would also like to take this time to allow Mr. Cloyd to address the board. He as some of you had mentioned, he attended a city council meeting recently where he discussed some of the implications of TIFs in general and implications of proposed TIFs. To that extent, I'd like to thank him on behalf of the board for all the hard work he's put in on this issue. Same goes for Dr. Kinney. We have been in constant contact with the city. I appreciate the collaboration that we've had with city officials and city council in addressing this issue. And before I turn the mic over to Mr. Cloyd, I would just also like to add, there's a mention of a rift between the park district and the school district. Well, I know that that is a popular, let's call it cocktail conversation. I meet with park district officials, and other people meet with park district officials. Dr. Lathan talked about how they meet with Peoria Park District employees. There have been issues in the past, but I like most of the people over there. In fact, I like all the people over there, so that you can't write that in the paper. And we do work with them, and we're going to work with them in the future, okay? So, because I would be remiss to say this summer, let's not forget the Park District provides a lot of activities for our kids that are much needed in these summer months, so we really appreciate them for that and all they do. I'll turn it over to Mr. Cloyd.
Thank you, sir. I would also add that the Park District has for many years provided the elite programs in Peoria Public High Schools as well. That's one of their programs. Last Tuesday, I spoke to the City Council, and the purpose of that was to call attention to the Downtown Conservation TIF. This is a proposal that would encompass the area very close to the river, which includes the Academy Administration Building and blocks near there. The purpose of the TIF is to provide infrastructure development and other types of investment incentives for commercial and office-type properties and possibly residential as well. The reason I spoke was that this is a very large budget for this TIF. The total number of dollars they could spend through this TIF is $270.5 million. That's more than double the city's annual budget, and they could spend that over a period of 23 years. The problem is that once you put the TIF in place, any increase in property tax values, or the EAV, above the current level would be, in effect, used by the TIF for infrastructure and other development, and it would be unavailable to the city, the public schools for 23 years. And if you take a look at what the forecast was, the forecast for the city's economic development EAV, or the downtown conservation EAV, was about $50 million by the year 2021. And frankly, if you look at what might be scheduled to be built in that space, that may be a very conservative number. If the city is correct in its assessment, over a period of 23 years, that is $46 million in city taxes, incremental city taxes, that would not be available to District 150 until the year 2036. And it would take us another 15 to 20 years to break even on that, because we wouldn't be getting all that money back over a period of 1 year. It'd be another 10 to 15 years. If the EAV in that district goes up by $300 million, which is entirely possible, there's something on the order of $261 million in taxes that could be, in effect, available for the TIF and not available for District 150. So the reason we were there presenting our point of view was simply that there's too much at stake. And frankly, the entire area of downtown Peoria is now covered with TIF districts. And some of them have gone 23 years, and at least 2 of them have been extended a number of years. And there's a point at which this is becoming impossible for us to see how any economic growth and development downtown provides any value and any additional tax revenue to this district for the rest of our lifetimes. I don't know how long you plan to live, but I won't be around in 2051 probably. Well, you might be, but I won't. So the point here is we have a responsibility on behalf of the students and the taxpayers and the parents here to try and find ways to do what we can to develop some relationship with the city on this particular TIF so that we're not left out of this for the next 23 years. So that was why I was there. Dr. Kinney was with me. We have been communicating with the city leadership for some period of time on this, and we felt it was appropriate to go public with it at that city council meeting simply because you need to hear about that, and it shouldn't be a discussion that takes place behind closed doors. So, Dr. Kinney, you may want to add something to that, but I think we all understand why this is done. We all understand that the city needs to do things and be able to bond for it so that they can develop and invest in infrastructure. But it is just patently unfair that the city puts TIF districts in place year after year after year, and we see no ability to get any value out of that for a generation or more of students that go through our schools. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Cloyd on this topic? Any questions, or Dr. Kenny for that matter?
Well, I don't have any questions. I just want to, as you stated earlier, Mr. Crawford, to thank Mr. Cloyd and Dr. Kinney for putting these things on the table. Obviously, the time has come for us to be openly directive in many of these cases or financial issues on behalf of the 14,000 students and the employees of District 150. I think we've come to the point of saying, perhaps in a nice way, not a very divisive way, but a way of saying enough is enough. And so we need to start doing things differently if we're going to preserve this community. So I just want to thank the two of you for taking us to that table, and we will continue with all our intergovernmental relationships to build upon that, to continually make Peoria a great city. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Butler. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we will move on then to the rest of the meeting. Remarkable rule number 3, any questions for Dr. Kinney on purchase orders over $2,500? And just briefly, for those exiting, if you could just try to keep it down, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to remarkable rule number 4, Dr. Lathan, reports under the Freedom of Information Act.
Since our last board meeting report on May 13, 2013, we received 10 new Freedom of Information Act requests. Of these new requests, 7 were filled. There were 3 pending requests noted on the May 13, 2013 board report. Those requests were filled. We received 43 requests for this calendar year.
Thank you, Dr. Lathan. That takes us to the items on tonight's consent agenda. Well, first I should ask any questions for Dr. Lathan on FOIAs? Okay. That'll take us to the items on tonight's consent agenda. Vice President Cloyd.
Thank you, President Crawford. Item number 1, gifts to the school district. This meeting, a total of $8,750, and year-to-date, $130,453.50. Proposed action is that the Board of Education accept the following donations and that letters of appreciation be sent to the donors. And there's a substantial list here, so I'm going to recognize the names of the donors without all the details and hope they'll understand that. School supplies and musical instruments and other audiovisual equipment donated by Debbie Rubush, Amber Simpson, Jenny Shaw, Nancy Morgan, Jenny Shaw again, and Mary Howard. And there were also donations made to the Rockin' for Development benefit at Hines School by Dr. Pepper Snapple Company, Caterpillar, Alice Finney, Prospect Sound and Lighting, Timeless Creations, Ava's Daisy, Heights Flowers, Kroger, Olive Garden, and LaFleur Gift Shop. There were also donations made to the District 150 Foundation Golf Outing totaling $7,395 by Consociate, Janssen Law Center, PCM&D LLC, Farnsworth, Citizens for Leach, United Security Communications, Ryan Beasley, Matt and Laura George, Moore and Kerr Engineering, Proliance Energy LLC, and John and Linda Sane. And there were also donations made to the District 150 Foundation totaling $8,457 by Sherry San Philip, Subway, Lowe's, Culver's, and Allied Health Chiropractic Services Centers of Illinois. The total foundation donations were $12,792.66. Item number 2, payment of bills. Item number 3, the Human Resources Report. Proposed action is the appointment, employment, compensation, performance, resignation, retirement, or discharge of an employee. Item number 4, payment for travel. Item number 5, temporary approval and payment of bills. The proposed action is that during the period between June 17, 2013 and the next regular school board meeting, the Comptroller-Treasurer is given full authority to approve and pay any amounts due and owing by the school district which, in his judgment, is in the best interest of the school district and require payment prior to the next regular school board meeting. Item number 6, Memorandum of Understanding, PFT Local 780, Tree Wind. Proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the attached MOU with the Peoria Federation of Teachers, number 780, which modifies a previous MOU in effect from July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2014. Number 7, Memorandum of Understanding, PFT Local 780 in Woodruff. Proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the attached MOU with the Peoria Federation of Teachers 780, which modifies a previous MOU originally in effect from July 1, 2011 to June 30, 2014. Item number 8, Memorandum of Understanding, PFT Local 780 Manual Academy. The proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the attached MOU with the Peoria Federation of Teachers 780, which modifies a previous MOU originally in effect from September 29, 2010 through June 30, 2013, and revised on January 23, 2013. Item number 9, Board Policy 7:20, Bullying and Harassment of Students. The proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the changes to Board Policy 7:20, Bullying and Harassment of Students as presented. Number 10, Approval of Beverage Contract with Pepsi. Proposed action is that the Board of Education approve the 5-year contract with Pepsi as the sole provider of beverages for vending machines throughout the district. Number 11, Approval of School Portrait Vendors. Proposed action is that the Board of Education vote to accept the approved list of school portrait vendors for schools to choose from for the 2013-2014 school year. The school principal may sign a contract for the vendor of their choice included on the approved list. Each contract should be for only 1 year, beginning July 1, 2013, ending June 30, 2014. Number 12, Contract for Workers' Compensation Claims Administration with Sedgwick. Proposed action is that the Board of Education approves a 1-year contract with Sedgwick for administration of workers' compensation claims as presented. Sedgwick has provided this service for many years, though in the past has been through a broker. Item number 13, Fiscal Year 2014 Proctor Community Hospital Tutoring Contract Renewal. Proposed action is that the administration be authorized to renew an agreement with Proctor Community Hospital for the provision of hospital tutoring services during the 2013-2014 school year at a cost not to exceed $4,000. Item number 14, Fiscal Year 2014 Methodist Medical Center Tutoring Contract Renewal. Proposed action is the administration be authorized to renew an agreement with Methodist Medical Center for the provision of hospital tutoring services during the 2013-2014 school year at a cost not to exceed $79,836.48. Item number 15, FY 2014 OSF Tutoring Contract Renewal. Proposed action is that the administration be authorized to renew an agreement with OSF for the provision of hospital tutoring services during the 2013-2014 school year at a cost not to exceed $46,604.77. Item number 16, Settlement Agreement and Release of Claim. Proposed action is the attached agreement describes the settlement reached between the parents or guardians of student number 001 and the Board of Education regarding a request for due process hearing filed with the Illinois State Board of Education on May 30th, 2013. We request that the board approve the final settlement agreed as presented. And that concludes the consent agenda, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Vice President Cloyd. Would any of the board members like any of the items on tonight's consent agenda pulled for a separate vote? Seeing none, may I have a motion and a second to approve the items on tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Discussion.
Let's go over a few of the items for clarification. The MOUs, items number 6, 7, and 8. The MOU for Tree Wind, and actually all three of the MOUs cleaned up the language around transfers. We had some things that were pre-Senate Bill 7, items that were removed. But basically for Tree Wind and Woodruff, teachers are paid an additional $2,500 for working in those buildings, and also they complete 30 hours of professional development outside of their normal contracted school year. At Manual Academy, years past, under the school improvement grant, teachers completed 90 hours of professional development before the opening of the school year. This year, they will complete 30 hours prior to the beginning of the school for teachers, which is August the 15th. So that's as it relates to those MOUs. Also, this past January, board members, you approved the MOU for Peoria High School as a result of SIG, but that doesn't expire until 2014. And so we'll present that back to you at another time if we need to make changes there. Number 10, the beverage contract with Pepsi. That's new, something different that we're also trying to look, as we look at cost around the district and making sure we're competitive. Pepsi will be responsible for emptying out the machines and also providing us basically the commission checks and also some marketing as a part of the contract. So it went out as an RFP, and we narrowed it down, and Pepsi was selected as the prime vendor for the district. So unfortunately, Coke was not selected, Carla. And so it was starting, and that is a 5-year contract. The approved school list vendors, the portrait vendors, we had another issue where every school had a different vendor, and we were finding that schools and across the district, parents and students were not getting the best prices when they purchased their different portraits and all the different packages. And so we provided a list for the upcoming school year for principals to select. Principals gave us input into the vendors, and then it went out for RFPs, but they gave us the current vendors that they were using, and then that list was narrowed down, and that list is attached for your review. Dr. Kenny, I'll come back to 12. 13, 14, and 15 are standard contracts that we enter in with our local hospitals on an annual basis to provide services for students that are hospitalized. And so I think that's been going on since 1987, if I'm not mistaken. And then item number 16, where it says a settlement agreement, just to point out that the district is not paying out any money. That is, this is just agreement to provide evaluation and possible support services for an individual student based on some concerns that were presented. So, but there's no money that will be exchanging hands as it relates to a settlement. That is just a term that's being used as it relates to the Illinois State Board of Education being involved in this particular situation with student number 001. And then, let's see, item number 12. You want to add something on that one?
Just that we have been using Sedgwick as our third-party administrator. We are self-insured on our work comp, and so we'll be able to keep our current claims adjuster and continue working like we have been and save some money at the same time. So it's basically why we're doing it.
On number 9, the board policy 720, I actually spoke on it last meeting fairly extensively. I'm sure Mrs. Butler has things to add. I did want to make one note, which is on the 4th page of that item. It does still include the section that says AP to include, and the 4 items that we have asked the administration to include in the administrative procedure. That is not part of the policy. I believe since that's just typographical, we don't have to change anything, but I wanted to make sure everyone understood those 5 paragraphs are not in the policy. That's just what we want in the AP.
And AP is administrative procedure.
Did you want to say anything, Reverend Butler, on this policy that we are very proud of?
Very proud of, and that most of the school year, the members are those who are participants of the Peoria Teacher Advisory Committee worked very hard in research and conversation discussion to make sure that we could enhance and have a clear understanding when it comes to disciplining students with the issue of bullying. I want to thank Mr. Saltzman for his contribution to this, as well as Chief Collins bringing us information. We work with the Center for Prevention of Abuse. So again, a lot went in to make sure that we have clear communication and instructions of what to do in educating the students, teachers, and community about this issue. And when a discipline measure is taken, it is clearly understood. So I encourage the board members to accept and vote yes on this second reading of this bullying policy. Also, thanks to the policy committee for helping us to move this in a timely way so it can be in effect for the coming school year.
And thank you to our attorneys who we literally sat down with and went through comma by comma, bickering about how to make this as clear and non-legalese as possible. Gave us 2 hours of their lives for my concerns about commas. So hopefully it will be clear and helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Patel and Reverend Butler. I just had a question on stylistically. We're calling for payment for travel. Previously been travel requests. Is there a reason for the change or? Okay. It's just something that jumped out at me tonight. Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure that was the reason for it, okay. All right, any other discussion or questions? Okay, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mrs. Costa? Aye. Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Ms. Patel?
Aye.
Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
Mrs. Wilcox?
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
Before we move to the deliberation agenda, I neglected to approve the minutes, our amended minutes from May 13, 2013, and the minutes from our last meeting of May 28, 2013. So if I could have a motion to approve those, I would appreciate, and a second, I'd appreciate it.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Point of order, that is a correct motion, correct? I can ask for them together?
Yes, you can.
All right, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Abstain.
Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mr. Patel? Aye. Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
Mrs. Wilcox?
Aye.
5 ayes, 1 abstain.
That takes us to the items on tonight's deliberation agenda. Reverend Butler.
Yes. Item number 17, expulsions. The proposed action that the expulsions listed on the report dated June 17, 2013 be approved as amended.
Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mrs. Costa? Aye. Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Ms. Patel? Aye. Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
Mrs. Wilcox?
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries.
It is also stated students expelled by the board are referred to by number, thereby ensuring privacy. Board action concerning the students have been decided in executive session.
Item number 18, amended budget resolution. Proposed action that the Board of Education approve the following resolution. Whereas the Board of Education of Peoria School District 150, County of Peoria, State of Illinois, caused to be prepared an amended budget, and the Secretary of the Board has made the same conveniently available to public inspection for at least 30 days prior to final action thereon. And whereas a public hearing was held as such budget on the 17th day of June 2013, notice of said hearing was given at least 30 days prior thereto, as required by law, and all other legal requirements have and been complied with. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Education of said district as follows, that the amended budget containing an estimate of amounts available in each fund separately, and the expenditures from each be and the same is hereby adopted as the budget of this school district for the 2012-2013 fiscal year. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
No, just a comment to Dr. Kinney. Again, thank you for your leadership in keeping us informed and helping us to see and not lose hope in terms of someday being more solvent with our finances. You've helped us to be very fiscally responsible in what we have voted on doing and better educated at our representation of these public funds. So thank you so much. Like I said, we're going to get there. You keep us hopeful.
Thank you, Reverend Butler. Any other questions or comments on this particular issue, on this action item? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Butler?
Aye.
Mrs. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Crawford?
Aye.
Mrs. Patel?
Aye.
Mr. Floyd?
Aye.
Mrs. Zerflag?
Aye.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried.
Presentation and suggestions by board members.
I have one. As a practical matter, I think when the consent agenda is longer than 10 items, we should have a second reader, because I think you were wearing Rick's voice out. And that's a long read. So perhaps we should consider for next year.
It gives the vice president something to do at the.
That is true. But maybe we should split it when it is a 16-item consent agenda.
How about we go around the table?
No. And I also just wanted to say, we had the library people out here a couple meetings ago, and we talked briefly about the bookmobile, and the bookmobile is running again just in time for summer, so all the kids who are out of school can hit up the bookmobile, which is the best thing my taxes pay for.
Mr. Crawford, I have a suggestion. First of all, I want to say thank you and congratulations to Dr. Lathan and all of the staff at District 150 for what I consider a very successful, encouraging, and inspirational school year. As some know, the school year ends on June 30th, so this is our last school board meeting for the 2012-2013 school year, and I believe that great work has been done, which leads me into the suggestion. We know, in looking back over the year, we can look at information that tells us how well things have gone, what have been some of the achievements and accomplishment of District 150, where remarkable happens every day. I would like to suggest that Dr. Lathan and Mr. Copeland make sure that that information gets out into the community so we can celebrate what happened this past year and be prepared and excited about the coming school year.
Mr. Cloyd?
And I would second that, if that's a motion.
Aye.
I would also add something, Mr. Atkins-Dutrow, congratulations on your election. We had a very constructive discussion a couple of days ago, and I think that's great, and I think that there's great value in having that type of ongoing dialogue. So thank you for that, and best wishes.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Anything else?
Just, we will work on getting a copy of that year in review out, and I hope that our partners in the press will share that information and share the highlights from the year. I would just like to also say thank you. This is the completion of 3 years, exciting years, busy years,
Yes.
and I'm very thankful that we have been on this journey together, and I'm looking forward to another 10 years. Claiming it. Have a good one.
She didn't say years, just another 10 years.
Reports from board committees. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.